What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. And this one is some of my final thoughts ahead of the Gameweek 32 deadline. So I'm going to go through the latest press conference information. We got updates about Saka, Isak and Kluivert, answer some of your questions, go through benching headaches, talk about whether you should bench boost this week as well. And then I'll quickly finish off by talking about my own team. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Let's get into it. So let's start with Newcastle, who have got a double game week this week. Jason Tindall took the press conference instead of Eddie Howe. On Anthony Gordon, he said he's had a decent week with the physios. He was back out on the grass for a session yesterday, so we'll assess him today to see how he's responded to that. And then we'll have to make a late call on whether he's available for Sunday. So there is a chance that Gordon's going to be in the squad against Man United at home. I would say based on that, it's quite unlikely that he would start the game. I think your best bet as a Gordon owner is that he comes on for 20 minutes, whatever it might be, against Man United, and then starts the game against Crystal Palace. So there's no way I would be buying Gordon right now. I would also avoid Harvey Barnes as well, because once Gordon is back fit, presumably he'll go back to first choice left winger. Whether or not you should sell Gordon if you own him, that is tricky. I think if you've got the spare transfer, I'd be tempted to do it to like Jacob Murphy instead, because from everything we've seen over the last few months, Murphy will start both of those games, whereas with Gordon that just seems quite unlikely. If they're still having to make a late call on him, that just doesn't sound like a start to me. So is a benching and a start enough? And it could be that he's benched twice. We know that Gordon is part of Newcastle's first choice 11 when fully fit, and obviously there's huge games coming up for Newcastle. They're trying to get Champions League spots and stuff like that. But you also don't want to risk him then losing for the rest of the season. So I think a benching and a start against Palace is best case scenario. And because of that, if you've got the spare transfer, I'd move him on. If it's for a hit, I'd be less inclined to do it. On Isak, he said he's trained and he feels fine. It's something we'll assess day by day, but we're expecting him to hopefully be available for the weekend. Beyond that, we're not really looking ahead of Man United. The fact that he said hopefully be available for the weekend, I think has spooked people. I personally think, and I could be wrong, there's a lot of worry about Isak in the FPL community, and it's just not valid at all. Like, he started the last game. I've said this a couple of times already this week. He was subbed early because the game was 3-0, not because he had an injury or something like that. Ahead of the game, Eddie Howe said he's 100% fit. After the game, he said the same thing. He said they don't need to manage him. Tyndall's now saying he's trained and he feels fine. Yes, he's got that minor groin problem that was mentioned a couple of weeks ago. If that flares up, maybe he'll get reduced minutes at some point. But I think there's every chance he plays 80 plus in both of these games in the double. There is no way I'd be selling him. I'd still be buying him if I had it, buying him if I didn't own him. I'd definitely be captaining him. And I also think he's triple captain material as well. Like, cue a start against Man United, a 60-minute sub, and then he doesn't start against Palace. Obviously, that could happen. But I really think it's a bit of a overreaction. And I know people will say, well, now they said he's fine, that means he's not going to start. But that's nonsense, right? Eddie Howe told us it was a minor problem before the Leicester game, then he started. Eddie Howe told us that Gordon hadn't trained with the group yet, then he wasn't in the squad. They're not just giving us lie after lie in the press conferences. So if we take them at their word, Isak is fine. So what's the problem? So I would buy him if you don't have him. I'd captain him for sure. I don't think there's anyone particularly close this week. Anthony Gordon, I've said what I've said. And I think that's about it for Newcastle. So for Arsenal, Mikel Arteta confirmed that Declan Rice and Bukayo Saka are both fit. They went off with knocks in the Real Madrid game. Does that mean they're both going to start in game week 32? Who knows? I expect that Declan Rice will. Bukayo Saka I'd be a lot less sure about. If I had to predict it, I'd probably put Saka on the bench for Brentford at home, ready for that second leg against Real Madrid. Even though Arsenal have got a 3-0 lead, I just don't see Mikel Arteta taking it for granted. So I think there will be some rotation in that Brentford game. And based on what we've seen from Saka since returning from his injury, it's most likely that he's going to get minutes off the bench. He also said that Calafiori is progressing really well. To give you a time one is difficult. So I'm guessing to give a time frame, because he needs to step up having more people around, but he is in a good place. So for those people looking at going for Kivior, I think in the short term, until Arsenal have got more defenders fit, that he will start. He just seems to be the player that's going to come in and play instead of Gabriel, like he did against Real Madrid. So for less than 5 million, that's not a bad punt at all. If you want to go for double defence, or if you can't afford Saliba or whatever it might be. I guess long term, if Ben White and Lewis Skelly and Timber and Calafiori are all fit, you could see Timber right back, Lewis Skelly left back, Calafiori left centre back. But that guy cannot stay fit. So I think as a punt, Kiwior is looking pretty good. So for Liverpool, the biggest news that came out today is probably that Mo Salah is going to remain at the club for another couple of seasons. And this isn't news that I would usually mention in the final thoughts video, but he's been such a big part of FPL squads since he's been at Liverpool. I wanted to give it a brief mention. As a Man United fan, I kind of wish it hadn't happened, of course, because he's been so good for Liverpool. But for FPL, we're going to be talking about picking him once again next year. And he's never been priced above 13 million. Which is kind of mad when you look at his record. Next year, he's got to be 13.5, 14 million, whatever it is. You cannot price him at 13 million or below because the idea that he will definitely decline next year, I don't think anyone can guarantee that. So give him a better price next year in FPL. I've already seen some people say they now want to captain him instead of a double game week player because of this contract. I wouldn't put too much thought into that, to be honest with you. You can even frame it a different way if you wanted to. He's got the contract now. Maybe he'll start having a bit of a relaxing end to the season and go again next year. I don't think that will happen. I think the guy absolutely wants as many goals, assists as possible. But yeah, wanted to quickly mention that. In terms of press conference news, Slot confirmed that Alisson is now fully recovered from concussion and set to start against West Ham. So if you've got Alisson and you've been worried about him, he should be back in the team. And as long as he doesn't pick up an injury, he should play the remaining games. The only time I'd be worried about Liverpool rotation is once they fully won the league and no one else can mathematically win it. Then we might see a bit of rotation, but until then, not really an issue. And then Connor Bradley also expected to start after lively cameo versus Fulham is what James Pearce said on Twitter. If you're looking at Connor Bradley, I think for a couple of game weeks, I think it's decent. West Ham at home, Leicester away as a single game week defender. There's not a huge amount of better options out there. We know he can be attacking. He's a massive differential as well. I really like him. Long term, the fixtures aren't great for clean sheets for Liverpool, and at some point, presumably Trent will be back as well. So I don't necessarily see him as a amazing long term option, but in the short term, I think he's great. So there's another £50 Amazon voucher up for grabs in Game Week 32. All you have to do is play the Premier League Pick'em game over on Sleeper and join the Let's Talk FPL League, which is completely free. You can do so using the link in the description below or scanning the QR code on screen. So all you have to do is predict whether it's going to be a home win, an away win, or a draw for each match in Game Week 32. Whoever gets the most amount of correct predictions will win that £50 Amazon voucher. If it's a tie for the same number of correct predictions, I'll do a draw to determine the winner on the next deadline stream. And I'm going to get my pick submitted now to show you how easy it is to do. So first up, I'm going to go for a Man City home win against Palace. Hopefully it's high scoring because a lot of us have many players in that game for FPL. Brighton to beat Leicester. I think Forest will beat Everton, but that'll be a very low scoring game. I could see like a 1-0 or something like that. Southampton versus Villa. There's probably going to be mass rotation for Villa, but they're still going to be too strong for Southampton to get anything there. Arsenal to beat Brentford, even though they will probably rotate as well. Chelsea to beat Ipswich and Liverpool to beat West Ham feels fairly straightforward. Wolves versus Spurs, a little bit more difficult to call, but Spurs have got all eyes on Europe at the moment, and Wolves have actually done okay recently. So I'm going to go for a Spurs loss there. Newcastle versus Man United. Man United defensively, I think, have done okay, despite the mistakes maybe from Onana at times. I'm going to go for a hopeful draw, although I suspect Newcastle will probably win that game. Then I'm going to go for Bournemouth. Draw against Fulham, actually. I think both teams are very good. It's going to be difficult to get 3 points either way. Although Bournemouth are at home. I'm actually going to go for a Bournemouth home win, but it's going to be tight. And then there's also obviously the next game, Newcastle versus Crystal Palace. It's a double game week, so I'm going to go for a Newcastle win in that as well. It's super easy to play. Just use the link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen. Join the Let's Talk FPL League and see if you can win that voucher. So for Bournemouth, Iraola confirmed that Ryan Christie is out for the season. He went on to say, we still have 3 days until Monday night. So Bournemouth versus Fulham in Game Week 32 is the Monday night game. We will try with Justin Kluivert, Marcus Tavernier and Sinistera. I cannot tell you right now. So going into Game Week 32, Kluivert is a doubt again. It was the same for 30, same for 31 as well. I'm really not quite sure what to do with him at the moment. Like if you're still an owner, obviously if you don't own, you're not buying. It feels like you can sometimes get into this trap where, well, I've already waited 2 weeks. What's another week? But then if he misses out again and then you're in that same position for Game Week 33, you've lost 3 game weeks. So it's a really tricky position. I don't think I would be removing him for a hit. And if you're really happy with your 7 other attackers, you could just bench Kluivert for 1 more week. Because once he is eventually back, he's really good value. But if you have got a spare transfer, there are other kind of cheaper midfielders that you could move to instead if you wanted to. So if I go to players kind of 7.3 or below, I think Rodgers likely to be benched this week, possibly one for 33 instead. Mitoma's picked up a bit of an injury, which I'll talk about in a minute. I don't mind Morgan Gibbs-White. I think the fixtures for Forest from now until the end of the season aren't bad, especially from an attacking point of view. So Everton at home this week, Spurs away in 33, Brentford at home in 34, then it's Palace away, Leicester at home, West Ham away. Not too bad. If you're not already tripled up on Man City, you've got a player like Savinho at 6.2 million. He was benched last week. There is no way you can guarantee that he's going to start every game. But Man City's matches for the rest of the season are pretty good, especially if you're on free hit 34. Otherwise, actually, like looking at it, I'm not sure how many other brilliant options there are. If you're not tripled up on Newcastle or Palace, I would definitely be moving Kluivert to Eze, Sarr, Murphy or someone like that. Otherwise, it's like Gibbs, White, Rodgers from 33, maybe Savinho this week. And that's about it. So I guess now I've looked down the options, I'm trying to think if there's anyone I've missed. Maybe keeping Kluivert one more week is okay. But if you're in a position where you need him to play, you just can't guarantee that. So in that position, as long as it's not for a hit, I would probably be looking to move him on, especially if you've got money to maybe go up to someone else instead. Like Mbeumo is probably not a bad option for the rest of the season. Not great this week specifically because he's playing Arsenal away, but after that, still pretty good. So for Brighton, Mitoma is a doubt going into the Leicester game in game week 32. Apparently he's got a heel issue. He's not completely ruled out, but he is a doubt. Because of that, if you were thinking about taking a punt on him, I would avoid buying him. If he's in your team, it's a tricky one because Leicester is such a good fixture. And if he does start, there's obviously huge points potential. But they also might think that because it's Leicester at home, they can win that game without him. And at the best, they might just put him on the bench or leave him out completely. I think for most people, unless you've got the luxury of many spare transfers, I'd probably leave him because Leicester is such a good game. But if you do have a spare transfer, I'd maybe look at moving him on. I don't think he's necessarily a terrible long-term option, but this is Brighton's best fixture for a little while. They got Brentford away in 33, West Ham at home in 34, and Newcastle at home in 35 as well. To be honest, it's not a terrible run. Like if you had Mitoma, you'd be happy enough to play him in any of those games, but he's not so good that you have to keep hold of him. So if you've got room to move him to a different cheap midfielder instead, and the spare transfer, I would do it. I think it's perfectly fine to hold on to him if you want to, and I definitely would not be buying him now. So benching headaches was difficult this week. There's a few players you can never be quite sure if they're going to start. There's another couple of players that are so close in terms of their points potential, it's hard to split them. And then you've got players that could get rotated because of European matches. So for this week, I've put Saka, Rashford, Timber and Konza quite low down the list because I think there's a high chance that they're all benched in game week 32. I cannot guarantee it. All four of those players might start. But I think based on Konza getting rotated for the last Premier League match against Forest, then starting against PSG, same with Rashford, I think they probably get benched against Southampton. And obviously with Saka, he hasn't started a game since he's back from injury. And that Real Madrid second leg is massive. So I think he'll just get saved for that. That's why they're so far down the list. If you think that I'm wrong on that, which I absolutely could be, and you think Saka's going to start, for example, you should definitely be playing him against Brentford at home. Probably the same with Rashford against Southampton away if you've got strong opinions on that. But for people looking at Konza versus Saliba, Konza versus Vardiol, I wouldn't take the risk on Konza being benched and coming on for a 1-point cameo. I would just play the player you're going to be pretty certain is going to start. I mean, could Saliba get benched against Brentford and save for Real Madrid? Possibly, but I don't think that Arteta will make that move. I think Saliba will play. So from the top, if you've got Watkins, I will be starting him this week. I'm not 100% sure if he's fully fit, but he didn't start that first leg against PSG. It seems very likely he starts against Southampton. Then Marmoush, he's had 90 minutes since Haaland got injured. He's almost certainly going to start. I've still got a little bit of hope that he's on penalties, but until we see one, we can't guarantee, and it could be Gundogan or someone like that instead. Then in Mbeumo, quite high up the list, even though it's Arsenal away, you know he's going to play. He's on penalties. The minutes are great. So that kind of supersedes a lot of the other players on this list. Then I've gone for Savinho and then Foden. I'm not sure which one of those two is going to start. It could be both of them. But given that Savinho got rested in the last game, I think he comes back into the team. Potentially Savinho was not rested. It was just a setup against Man United's wing-backs. maybe they do the same against Palace because Palace play with wing-backs as well, and Savinho could be on the bench again. But I'm just guessing, right? So I'm putting Savinho slightly ahead of Foden. Then Marino, if some of you have got him, he could start, although I suspect he won't start as the number 9. I think we could see Sterling, Trossard, Nwaneri, front 3. And so if Marino plays, it might be as a midfielder. But if you've got him, it's a pretty good fixture. And he hasn't had a huge amount of minutes this season, so potentially doesn't need resting as much as other players. In terms of the defenders, if you've got Lewis Dunk, I would have him quite high up because Leicester just cannot score a goal. And although Brighton might be missing the likes of Mitoma, I still think they'll be fine. So Dunk ahead of Saliba. Saliba and Vardiol, I could spend from now until the deadline trying to decide which one of those two should be played, and I probably still wouldn't know for sure. The reason that I've got Saliba ahead of Vardiol is because if you look at the clean sheet odds from Rob T FPL on Twitter, Arsenal are slightly ahead. And also, the other thing that's kind of flipped me into putting Saliba slightly ahead is most people have at least one, probably two Palace attackers. Not many people have Brentford attackers right now. There's going to be a few of you still within Burma, but not a huge amount. So I think for that reason, I'd maybe bench Vardiol just ahead. But Vardiol's probably better for attacking returns, maybe better for bonus as well. Go either way. I think most of you probably want to play Vardiol, so just do that, right? If you want to bench Saliba, that's absolutely fine. Then Colwill versus Ipswich because of the fixture. I think he'll start this game. Konate versus West Ham, then Milenkovic versus Everton. I think Forest clean sheet looks pretty good this week. You could maybe bump Milenkovic or Nico Williams a bit higher up. But I just think Konate, Liverpool's so good, and Colwill is the fixture. That's all there is to it. Then the 4 players I mentioned at the start, Saka, Rashford, Timber, Konza, just because I think they're going to get benched. And then some of you are deciding between Raya and Martinez. I'd go Raya. I think both teams are likely to rotate. Arsenal are at home. They're the strongest defence in the league. That's why I've put Raya ahead of Martinez. If you want to go for Martinez because of the fixture, absolutely do that. But I'm pretty confident if I wasn't bench boosting this week, that Raya would be in my 11 ahead of Martinez. So I've had a lot of questions this week about whether or not people should bench boost in Game Week 32, and each bench is always slightly different, so I can't go through each one individually and give an opinion, but I can give some general thoughts and advice around bench boost in Game Week 32. The first question I will always have is when will you have a better bench? Because everyone's teams are slightly different. Everyone's got different transfer plans over the next couple of game weeks when they might want to use other chips and stuff like that. When will you have a better bench? If you're free hitting in 34, triple captain in 33, you can't bench boost those weeks as well. So in 35, 36, 37, 38, etc., will your bench look much better? And if not, how many transfers is it going to take to be able to put a decent bench out? Because if it's going to take quite a few, and you're leaving it many game weeks until you play the chip, there's more stuff that can go wrong. So I think in a lot of cases, if your bench is pretty good this week, and you're not completely sure you're going to have a better bench over the next couple of game weeks, then I would probably just get it used rather than delaying it. Also, a lot of people are mentioning double game week 36, which could potentially happen. Let's say it does. There would be a maximum of 4 teams doubling. So that's 12 double game week players you could have in your team as a maximum. In that situation, you're still bench boosting with 3 single game week players. So bench boosting with 4 right now is not that much different. So although it sounds good, we could have a double game week, that's much better for bench boost. It's not a massive double game week. It's not like we've got 8 to 10 teams doubling. So I wouldn't panic about that too much. Will some of your bench issues, which people have got this week, get better in future weeks? That's another thing to consider. So for example, Villa players that could get rotated against Southampton, it's looking quite likely that Villa are going to go out of the Champions League. So those players like Rodgers and Konza, they become a lot less of an issue in future weeks. You know they're going to play. Whereas with a Foden, for example, your doubts about whether or not he's going to start are going to be every single game week. If you don't bench boost with him this week and you're looking to bench boost with him in 35, 36, whatever it might be, he's still an issue, right? Because you're never going to be completely sure he's going to start. And also, if you've got Foden and you're saying, well, next week he's got a double, so he'll probably start at least one, that's fine. But because he's got a double game week, he then goes into your team. He wouldn't be on the bench, so a different player would get benched instead. So there's lots of things to consider. The longer you leave it to play, or the longer you leave it to play the chip, the more potential issues you have. The 4 players that come up a lot are Foden versus Palace, Saka versus Brentford at home, Rodgers versus Southampton, Konza versus Southampton as well, because they are all players that could get benched this week. I would say, as a general view on this, if you've only got one of those players, especially if it's like a Saka, Rodgers, Konza where it's possible European rotation, I still think I would bench boost and just take the risk, because we could be wrong. Like Saka, Konza and Rodgers could all start. I think if you've got Foden on the bench, I wouldn't let that put you off using it, because he could start. There's not European stuff you're worried about there. That's general rotation that's not going to get any better. So if you can play it, I would. And if you've only got one issue, I'd probably get it used. If you're sat there with Rodgers, Konza and Kluivert, I'd probably delay it and just hope that you have a better bench in the future. Another question that I've not got listed here, which a lot of people ask, is how many hits would you take to get out a decent bench? And again, it really comes down to how easily will you be able to have a good bench in the future. If you can get the perfect-ish bench this week for 1 -4, and you're not really going to have a better chance to use it in the future, I'd probably do that. If you're starting to talk about -8s, -12s just to get a bench boost out, you're pretty much nullifying the benefit from bench boosting in the first place. So again, I would probably delay it. But have a think about what your future bench will look like. So for example, if you're someone that's got Rodgers and Konza in game week 32 and you don't want a bench boost, in game week 33, because they've got a double, they will go into your 11. So a lot of people, and it's not going to be everyone, but a lot of people in 33 would have like Jacob Murphy and Livramento on the bench instead. So is Murphy versus Villa away and Livramento versus Villa away better than Rodgers and Konza against Southampton this week? Not if they all start, but because of the doubts of the Villa players, I'd probably just go in 33 instead. If you're in a position where you've got a triple captain one week and bench boost the other, you're just going to have to go for the best possible option for your team and just get it used. Like, it sucks that it's not perfect and there are these doubts, but at some point this chip has to be played. You can't save it until next season. So without looking at everyone's teams individually and what future weeks will look like, I think that's about the best I can do in terms of whether you should use it this week. I know there's going to be a bunch more questions coming in on the deadline stream tomorrow, but the key question is, when will you have a better bench? Because if it's not anytime soon and you've only got like 1, maybe 2 slight issues, I'd be tempted to get it used this week if that was the original plan. So let's get into some of your questions. Is there a better triple captain between now and the end of the season than Isak in game week 32? Now, I spoke about triple captain quite a lot in the game week preview video, so if you want a more detailed answer, go and watch that. You can skip straight to the chapter where I spoke about it. Basically, Isak this week, Man United at home, Palace at home. Saka in game week 33, Ipswich away and Palace at home. Or you could go for Marmoush, which is Everton away, Villa at home. They're probably the 3 best options over the next couple of game weeks. We could have doubles in game week 36. They're not officially confirmed, but it could happen. But even if they do, there's not a huge amount of standout better options that would definitely be better than Isak. And also, you cannot guarantee those doubles will happen because they'll be based on the FA Cup semi-final results. And if you want to go for a certain player and that player is in a team that loses, they then wouldn't double. So for me, the main options are Isak this week or Saka next week. Could Saka go and get injured against Brentford or the Real Madrid second leg? Possibly. If not, on paper, I think he is the best captain in 33 as long as he plays both games. The slight issue is if Arsenal go through against Real Madrid, which they're very likely to do now, does Saka get protected over the next few weeks to make sure that he's ready for the semi-final? That could happen because Arsenal are not very likely to fall outside of the Champions League places in the Premier League. So their focus now is going to be on winning that European trophy. So I think it's between Saka and Isak mostly for most people. If you don't want to go for Saka, I would just put it on Isak this week. I've said already in the video, I think people are worrying too much about potential injuries with Isak. Could it happen? Yes. But I think based on everything we know, he's fit going into this game week and it's a good double. So if you want to just use it now to make sure nothing else bad happens in the future where you get stuck with your triple captain, I think it's fine to use it this week. If not, Saka next week seems good too. So who is the best Aston Villa midfielder to punt for game weeks 32 and 33? So your 4 options are Rodgers, Rashford, Asensio and Marlon. I've tried recording the answer to this question quite a few times and I end up just going round and round in circles talking about minutes. So I'm going to try and keep it brief. I don't think necessarily that any of these 4 players start all 3 games over 32 and 33. I think there is very likely to be rotation. The player who I think will get the most minutes over those 2 game weeks is Rodgers, based on everything we've seen so far this season. Do I think he'll start against Southampton? Probably not, but he has been a machine all year. So there is a chance. And I think once Villa potentially and probably get knocked out by PSG, he'll then definitely start both games in 33 because they're going to be chasing Champions League places. So minutes-wise, I think Rodgers is the best, but I cannot guarantee you he'll start against Southampton. Rashford seems to be first-choice penalty taker, but I also don't think he'll start against Southampton. And based on his minutes so far since he's joined Villa, there's no guarantee he would start both games in 33. Whereas with Asensio, he didn't start against PSG, so I think he will start against Southampton. And then you've got a chance of getting at least one of the games in 33. So actually, over 32 and 33, I think Asensio might be slightly better for minutes than Rashford. Can I guarantee you that? Of course not. And then Marlon, I think I would avoid. I think it's very likely he starts against Southampton, but there's no guarantee he starts either games in 33. So if we're looking at minutes, it's Rodgers. If we're looking at penalties, it's Rashford. But actually, I think Asensio might be slightly better for 32 and 33. But honestly, if you're looking for these 2 game weeks and then obviously the rest of the season as well, if you're not likely to wildcard in 34, 35, whenever it might be, it's probably Rodgers. And I know that's really boring, but he's the obvious pick because he's played all year. And unless he gets injured, he's going to continue to do so. Outside of him, if I was picking just for the 2 game weeks you've mentioned, Asensio, and if it's for longer term for the rest of the season and you really don't want to go for Rodgers, then I'd pick Rashford. So would you get Trossard for a guaranteed 90-minute midfielder, especially if Arsenal go all the way to the final in the Champions League? I think Saka will get reduced minutes until the end of the season. So I don't think you can guarantee 90 minutes from Trossard. Let me just say that. But I do think it's almost a guarantee that he will start against Brentford in game week 32. Because once you get past Martinelli, Marino and Saka, which is Arsenal's first choice front 3 at the moment, Trossard is probably the next most senior player for those front 3 positions and he can play in any of them. So I think this week is good. My concern would be, I think Arsenal will get through, right? There is a possibility that Real Madrid could come back and then all of a sudden Trossard's minutes go down. But let's forget about that. I think most of us expect Arsenal to go through. The next 2 games for the semi-final, I think, are either side of game week 35. So I agree that Saka will probably be protected, but I don't think it's a case that he'll get benched against Brentford, start against Real Madrid, and then just bench in 33 for both games in the double and 34 as well. Because at some point, players need rhythm, right? They need to play matches to stay fit, to stay sharp, etc. So I don't think you can guarantee that Trossard starts all the games that aren't in Europe. You could argue that for his price, he's not a bad punt, and I would go along with that. But I think if you're buying him for guaranteed start, I just wouldn't go there. Like, I will be buying Saka for game week 33 if he comes through the Real Madrid game unscathed. No doubts about that whatsoever. Ipswich away, Palace at home, too good to turn down. Then I'm free hitting in 34. In 35, I might sell him and just not go for him for the rest of the season. Because if Arsenal get through the semi-final, you've then got concerns for the rest of the season. I just don't think it's a case that Saka will stop playing because he needs to be kept fit as well. So there is part of that. And also, Arsenal are not guaranteed Champions League places. It's very likely, right? But I'm sure Arteta is not going to continually rotate all of those players just to save them for one semi-final. But in the game before the semi-final, absolutely there could be rotation. So Trossard's fine this week. I think you might get stuck later down the line though. So just really quickly on my team, based on what we've seen in the press conferences so far, absolutely nothing has changed from the team selection video yesterday. I'm still planning on rolling a transfer and I'm still planning on bench boosting in game week 32. So I've got Raya and Saliba double up for Arsenal defence. I do have Vardy on the bench based on the bench and headache section earlier. They could easily be flipped around. Yes, it doesn't matter because I'm on bench boost, but I always like to have a realistic bench to see what I would have scored. Then I've got Munoz and Livramento. Midfield is Salah, Palmer, Eze, Murphy and Sarr. Not too much to worry about there, apart from potentially Palmer. He started for Chelsea last night in their European match, but he went off at half-time. Maresca said that substitution was always planned. So I don't know if Palmer is completely 100% fit, because he had that injury before the international break, played against Spurs, then got benched in game week 31. I don't think I can guarantee that he's going to start in 32, but I think he will. So that's why he's in my 11. And also, as I've said for a couple of weeks now, the plan is to do Palmer to Saka in 32. By buying Saka this week, I do not guarantee better minutes, and Ipswich is a better fixture. So I'm giving Palmer one more chance in my team, and then if Saka's fit for 33, I'm definitely buying him instead, and Palmer will be no more in my squad. And he hasn't scored for a while now. I think I saw something on Twitter saying it's 13 games since he scored. So not great for the money he costs, but I'm going to give him the Ipswich game. Isak is still my captain. I know that Tyndall said hopefully he'll be fine and they'll assess him week by week. I really don't have that many concerns about Isak. Definitely not as many as other people. And I don't really want to captain Eze or Murphy instead. Isak is pretty clear the best option if he starts both games. I think he will start both games. Therefore, I'm captaining him. Marmoush next to him. Then my bench is Martinez, Evan Nielsen, Vardio, Nico Williams. I'm in a much luckier position than other people. I don't have Saka, Konza, Rodgers to worry about on the bench. Nico Williams will start. Vardio will start. Evan Nielsen will start. The only slight concern is Martinez because Villa will probably rotate. I'd be very surprised if they rotate their goalkeeper. Don't forget that Villa still need Champions League places in the Premier League. And so why would you... Like, you're 3-1 down. And look, Unai Emery's not going to come out. And I'm sure he doesn't even believe that the tie is over, right? They could absolutely come back. But they still need to get Champions League places because the idea of them winning the Champions League, it's not that likely, right? I don't need to talk about this too much. He ain't going to rotate Martinez, surely. And if he does, I'll feel really unlucky if he does do that. He's probably not going to get anything against Southampton anyway. I could see Villa conceding, but overall pretty strong. So I'm happy enough with that team, unless we hear some other news later today or in the embargoed press conferences or the embargoed quotes later from the press conferences. Nothing's going to change. So I'm going to roll, go into 32, Palmer to Saka, Murphy to Rodgers, and then maybe do Isak to Watkins, although I'm less sure on that, but I don't need to decide this week, so I'll do it in 33. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, make sure you join the Let's Talk FPL League over on Sleeper, link in the description below. Get your predictions in before tomorrow, and I'll catch you tomorrow for the deadline stream.